Hey, this is Evan Marquez, dating coach for smart, strong, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast. I'm excited to share a good friend with you today. Before I do, if you are a regular listener, make sure you subscribe on Spotify or Apple or YouTube or wherever it is you get your podcast. Leave us a positive review. I do read the reviews. They've been mostly positive, and so I'm just going to take that as a small win here today. Uh, I've been doing a lot more interviews, and one of the things that I've enjoyed, I usually like to hear myself talk, but I've been doing more interviews, and I've been just delighted that the more people I listen to, the more I learn. And I'm bringing back a close friend here today to do something that's really different. It's not just straight up dating content, even though everything could be brought back to dating because we're talking about coming from a place of listening to your feelings and your values. And is this making me feel anxious? Is this sparking joy? Right? Like dating and life are neck and neck with each other. But my friend Marni Battista, I have her written bio here. I will give you her written bio, but then I'm going to talk about her personally.
Oh,
She's an entrepreneur, author, transformational coach, podcast host, radical truth seeker, and new Substacker. Her straight to the point podcast and page turning books drop pearls of wisdom that will provide life changing stories of triumph and courage, empowering you to start living the life beyond your wildest dreams. She's appeared in the LA Times, the Jerusalem Post, Happy Full Magazine, the HuffPost, and more. She's been on Dr. Phil, Dr. Drew, Ryan Seacrest. She lives with her husband in destinations around the world as they continue their radical living challenge, the subject of her new book that was just published last week. Um, this is my friend Marni Battista, and on a personal level, and again, I know the flattery is a little much, but truly, if anybody in the dating coaching industry, and her previous brand was Dating with Dignity, um, she is the best businesswoman and
oh,
the person most likely to invest in coaching to really walk the walk. She lives what she practices, so she's invested heavily in her own personal development, um, and singularly the best at reinventing her life and creating something from scratch that resonates better than the old version of her life. And I admire her greatly. So, Marni Battista, thanks for joining me.
oh, thanks for that. That was so nice. I mean, I'm so glad to chat to you always. And you're the guy who I was a nobody and I was like, can we have lunch? And you said yes, and you're a mensch. And I love you so much. So I'm gonna
Thank you.
flatter you back.
Not what we're here for, but thank you. Um, so I don't even know where to begin. I've got your questions, but I kind of just want to talk to you like a human being and kind
Do
of
it.
just dispense of the bullet points and we'll get to them. But I know you as someone who was not only a single mom, reinvented herself from school teacher to high ticket dating coach and business coach because you figured this out so well, right? And you had a business that I looked at with admiration, even if I got there before you. You did something that was really, really extraordinary. And you walked the walk and you got remarried and you rebuilt your life and you launched your daughters. And then something happened. Could you tell us what made you shift from I'm living the dream to maybe I'm not living the dream?
Yeah, that's well, so I believe that the universe whispers, but it takes sometimes a scream to get us to listen. Um, and so my truth sort of happened. It was right before the pandemic when everyone started hoarding toilet paper. I was skiing. Um, and I followed my friend in the neon orange jacket down a double black diamond on a perfect powder day, and I was feeling so confident. And I did have that moment of like, and I ended up flat on my back, breaking 7 bones in my sacrum. And that moment, I realized like this is a metaphor for my life. I am following, I am not really thinking about what's right for me. And I'm racing down the mountain, I'm racing through life. Um, And that journey of my recovery and my kids left all the nest. I was wondering if I was going to be able to walk without pain. Um, and my mom had died at 64. I was 55. I thought, if I have 9 years left to live, is this how I want to live it?
Pretty powerful. And so that was an awakening, but I know from private conversations we've had in the past year, there's the when the light bulb goes off, and then there's the pain that inspires you to take different action. So you're coaching women, you're running a seven-figure business, you've got vendors. Again, we have very, very similar life.
Right. Yep. I was in the
Um,
hustle and grind on the ladder. Um, yeah. So I think what happened was that, and I am saying this because I relate to your listeners. Like, you all are sitting there, like, totally Googling, like, you know, how many dates do I have to go on before I can sleep with him? Or best dating coach? Or what should I, like, looking for the answer. Like, when you're really smart and you succeed and you don't know what to do and you can't figure it out, it's a debilitating, terrifying space. And I was like, okay, great. Like, I'm not happy, but like, what do I do with this? And I started Googling like life transition coach, empty nest coach, like all these sorts of things. And all I was finding was like, for people much older than me, maybe that were like, get a hobby, learn how to play pickleball, get some interests. I was like, that's not me. It was like, let go of your kids, get your own thing going, or also there's the like, the business coachy vibe. But what I realized was like, I had built this life not really designed by me. And so when I first met you, for example, I was just interviewing everyone I could about like, how do I get rich doing what I love? Because I
yeah.
was a single mom. I was a nursery school teacher making $24,000 a year and divorced. And I was like, I'm not living in a one bedroom apartment with lawn furniture where my kids want to be with their dad. um, and I just literally was like, okay, well, who do I want to be like? And I just picked a bunch of names, not even just dating. It was like Tony Robbins. Like, I was just, pick somebody. And I just was like, well, I'm just going to do what they do.
Tony Robbins didn't have
Um,
lunch with you on Pico.
he did not have lunch with me at Pico. And so I was just like, I just felt I was just doing what the experts said,
Yeah.
And the bigger my business got, Evan, the less I was doing what I loved. I was like putting out fires, dealing with personnel, like arguing with the coaches on my team who felt like they weren't getting enough money, even though they were like making more than me, right? Like, it was just like so far away from my life that I really wanted. I didn't feel free, even though I had money. I was running around all the time. I was frenetic. I was hiring people to do like basic shit in my life, like clean my refrigerator and go to the grocery store for me. Like, and I just felt like this isn't the life. I checked all the boxes, but why is something still missing?
Mhm.
And so when I did all that searching, there was nothing that I found that was the answer. So that's when I like mix master DJ'd my own life reinvention process based on the design thinking model at Stanford University.
I love this because, again, Marnie is a friend for many years, a peer, and she not only had the business, right? Not just working for the man 2,000 billable hours. It was her business, her brand. She's the boss. She can technically do whatever she wants. She's got the income. She's got the young, cute husband. She's got all of it. Three beautiful, highly functional daughters, the whole thing. And she's not feeling joyous. So is this what the should life is? What you think you should do versus what you really resonate with?
Yeah. And so the whole thing is yes, I have the cute, amazing husband and all of those things. And he was really dissatisfied living in Los Angeles. And um, we're just arguing all the time about like, when are we going to leave? What else are we going to do? And I was like, no, we live here. This is what we're doing. I am on autopilot. Do not, I don't want to crash land. The autopilot is good enough. And I was blaming him for everything. And I think this is really an interesting thing too, because as a dating coach, one of the things that we do in our marketing is we say, like, get the guy and everything will be great, right? You'll live your best life ever. And so here I had the guy, and I was like, why are we fighting all the time? Did I make a mistake? Oh, by the way, I have a dating business, so my marriage has to be perfect because
Mm.
everyone is like looking to me to be like, the queen of all of this stuff. Um, and that's when I really realized, Evan, that this one essential principle that I talk about in my book is the problem you think you have isn't really the problem. So I thought the problems were my team or my husband or the number of dollars in my bank account or whatever it was. The real problem, I was terrified of change. I
Mm.
believed, and this relates to those of you who want to have a partner, but actually you're terrified of having a partner, right? Like I I feel safe. Like the world I've built with myself, like my house, my friend,
Yeah.
I felt in control. And I'm like, we cannot change anything. Because if we do, I will not be the badass boss bitch that I am. And that's terrifying. So we're just not changing anything. And that was it. I was terrified to change.
That is so profound. And again, we should, I don't know if we should do this on air or off air, but, um, I've been continuing my reading and my learning and belatedly, arriving at very similar conclusions that you already arrived at, that the the desire for control, right? Especially the money piece of it, right? The desire to say,
I'm the
hey,
breadwinner,
yeah,
FYI, right?
that's my definition. I'm supporting my wife and my kids, right? And I got to ride that thing as far as I can ride that. The suggestion that that's permanent, right? That it's unmovable. It, when circumstances change all the time, the resistance to the fact that things change and you have to adapt with things as they change, including empty nest, including different, economic climate and changes in online marketing. The resistance to the change is the problem. The fear of the change is the problem. And fear is pretty much always at the root of the problem. So, for our listeners who are hearing about you and your transformation for the first time, I want to bring it back to your book. How would you define simply what you call the should, SHOULD, the should life? And what happens when women recognize that they are living the should life? What's the next move for them? Because again, this is a long, slow transformational process for most people.
Yeah, so the should life, as you realize, and I think this is so profound in all areas, is that you are doing what you believe you should do to make you happy. Um, you should have this kind of a business. You should not upset the apple cart. You should work harder than everyone else. In dating, I saw it with so many. It's so funny, you see it all the time, but you can't recognize in yourself, right? Like I should meet a guy who looks like this. He should be this year old. He should have this body. He should spend this much time with his kids, but not too much time with his kids because he's got to spend time with me. I mean, the shoulds and the expectations are just massive. And so the first step that is part of the book is starting to ask better questions, right? Which is like, um, what would it look like if I just questioned every single should I have with the willingness to debate it because I'm smart, as if there were another possibility? Um,
Also immediate fear response to that.
yeah, because, and this is what I felt like, if I'm not this, then who am I?
Right, because you're removing, now we're talking about something that's not just a job, it's an identity. This is who I am. I am the responsible mother. My wife is the PTA treasurer. I am the dating coach for smart, strong, successful women. You strip all that away, right? You get cancer, that's not what you're thinking about. There's an, like who you are is your relationships mostly. It's really like, as I'm thinking of it out loud, it's how you relate to people. It's what we're doing right now is who we are. It's not what we do for money.
Yeah, exactly. And so I put all of my identity in my, my success looking a certain way, the expectations I had for my husband, all of those sorts of things. And um, so for me, one thing that I really need, because I am a strong, successful woman, was I need a process and a structure. Like you can't just be like, trust the process, meditate, like it'll come to you. I was like, no, 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 no. Like I need an actual pathway. Um, and that's why I kind of landed on this design thinking model because I was like, wait a minute. Once I got into it, I was like, wait, this is how like consultants worldwide are developing products. And so I was like, okay, so my product is the life that I want to have that I maybe even can't imagine yet. I am the user of the product. So, how would I go about systematically designing that in a way where I don't disrupt my safety? I don't blow up my life. I tiptoe into it in a way that allows me to evolve. So, I had this design thinking model, which I walk people through in my book. And then, because I am a little woo woo, I also need a way of changing the paradigm of what does success look like. And so I swapped out money, handsome husband, white picket fence, kids who get PhDs and make a lot of money, whatever it is for you, with these seven spiritual questions that I heard at a sermon shortly after my dad died. And the story goes that at the gates of heaven, and this is this ancient Talmudic, like Old Testament vibe thing, which I universalized and modernized. But the story is at the gates of heaven, you're asked these questions: did you lead a meaningful life? And I was like, okay, I'm going to use these new questions as my metric for success. They're all within my control. That's good. I'm going to go through this design thinking process, and all of a sudden, I'm like enjoying as much as one can enjoy change. And then I start to really realize, and this is important for everyone who's dating or doing something that's outside your comfort zone, the act of going for the extraordinary life has given me more joy, fulfillment, and meaning and pleasure than any destination I could imagine because I freaking went for it.
Yes, and I've observed that, and I'm there's so many layers that are going on in this conversation about our pre-existing relationship and
Uh-huh.
our respective careers, and I want to bring it back to our listeners. So someone's listening to this. Um, how I really want to talk about the inflection point because someone's listening to this and she's sort of identifying how does she know? What's the moment? What's the feeling? How does someone end up doing everything they can to live the best possible life and wake up far, far away from her meaning, joy, and purpose?
Well, I think because what happens is we get sold the myth that if we do these things, if we're the good girl, if we follow the rules, right, then we will be happy. And when something goes outside of our control, as life always does, and we start to internalize that it means that we screwed up or we're not enough or we don't deserve it, and go into regret and remorse, then we're actually going further and further away from our joy and our happiness. So, the inflection point is that what if, and I know this is very woo woo, but what if everything is happening for you, not to you? Because I believe that our soul is here to have this journey and teach us lessons. And it's whether or not we rise to the occasion of that or we keep pushing against it. And so if you're single, if you're frustrated, if you're attracting the wrong guys, if you are not sure if it's ever meant to happen for you, what if you start asking those different questions? What if you start saying, what are the things I can control that I can look at, which is like, how am I showing up in my life? Am I really being of the energy of a desirable, attractive, successful at dating woman? Like, am I being the CEO of my dating life? Or am I being like, oh, why does this everything happen to me? It's this journey is about finding congruence. Because I think all of us have these lessons that we're going to learn. And in our brains, we're like separate people, right? Like, oh, there's successful me. There's the great aunt. There's the great mom, but I suck at this one thing. And that's just not true. So, how do you bring that part of you that is missing and deficit in this dating journey and be like, whoa, my soul just like wants to be whole now. There's a lesson here. So, this is an opportunity. So what am I going to do with it? And then you go, well, I am a badass boss bitch. So let me get into it.
Right. I Yeah, I'm processing everything you're saying while thinking of the next thing I want to say to you. So I want to stay really, really present. Um, so when people like us, right, who've been on the track, work hard, succeed, make money, marry the guy who looks the certain type, et cetera, has these feelings and ignores these feelings for perhaps decades. How does someone who is identifying with these feelings, I'm not fully aligned, I'm not living my purpose, I'm not that happy, even though I could check all the boxes and put on social media that it looks good. For someone who's listening to this, um, what is the cost of staying on that track indefinitely? What,
Mm.
like, does someone just wake up one day and they're old and their life is just not what they thought it would be? Could we extrapolate that far?
We can. I interviewed someone from my show and he said it so interesting. He said that, when you ask someone this question, like, okay, well, what would you do if you had 9 years to live? And you're like, that's the question I asked myself. Oh God, well, do I want to sit here, look at pictures of my kids when they were 12, like that, waiting for them to come back and visit me? No, even though that feels easy. But the question was, if you had one day left to live, what would you regret that you did not do, that you did
Got it.
not try, that you did not go for? And I was like, well, that's a great ass question, right? That is the good, I call them wisdom seeking questions, because it goes deep into like, oh God. Um, and because I interviewed a rabbi once and he said he was at the deathbed of 1,000 people. And he said that only one in 1,000 said, I wish I would have worked more.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah,
else had
and
regrets.
regret famously is an emotion that grows over time. Other things lessen, right? The pain of loss, right? I moved past my father's death. It's still there, but I don't spend all my time on it. So loss diminishes. Regret grows because there's no making up for that lost time.
Exactly. So if you just say to yourself, well, Marni and Evan, like the one thing I know is that I don't want to have any regrets in my life. I want to like slide into my casket a little battered and bruised and scarred because I lived full out. you know then start thinking about, well, what does that mean? And for a lot of people, their radical living challenge, which is the name of my book, is deciding, you know what, like I do want to put myself out there again. I'm willing to get my heart little battered and bruised because I do want to have a life experience where I share it with someone, and I would rather try than not, or maybe it is starting that side hustle or retiring early or making up with a family member that you decided it was gonna never be in your life again. Radical isn't reckless. It's stepping outside of the box and saying, I have one precious life to live. What am I going to do with it?
So you did the radical thing of reinventing your whole business, less focusing on what we mutually did, dating coaching for smart, strong, successful women, and going into this radical life challenge, living an authentic life, scaling back the business, not all the employees, right? Really providing more personal attention to folks. And you did the cool thing, which again is just not on the cards for me. I talk about it with my wife. I was like, honey, I want to be more like Marnie. But we've got a 12 and a 13-year-old, so it's we're not at that phase. But could you tell our listeners what you did after when you just said, "Hey, we're going to change our life and we're going to get out of Los Angeles now that the kids aren't here"?
Yeah, so it was not that simple. So in that life design model, that design thinking model, like as you could imagine, like first you have to get to know the user. So we did a whole lot of stuff about like who are we, who am I really now, right? And that was a whole investigation. They call it the empathy phase in design thinking. It was like I got to really understand the user. Once I got a little more clarity on that, what we do is experiment in design thinking. It's called prototyping, right? So they don't just decide to like build the iPhone 18. They test a bunch of stuff and they iterate and all of those things. So we did prototyping, which started out as a few experiments living in RVs. We did like a little Sprinter van thing because van life looks cool on YouTube. Um, we assessed that. We then got into something bigger. We tried that. And then ultimately, and I'll tell you how this happened was, and this was my big revelation. In doing that empathy phase, I asked, like, what are some of my peak experiences in my life? And my husband and I were chatting about it, and they were all so clearly like in nature, with family, having these like new and novel experiences. Um, and I was like, why do I only do that on a vacation?
Right.
I also realized that my weekends, I thought I was having fun, but low key, I was using them to recover and catch up.
Same.
Right. And so I was like, whoa, wait a minute. So I was like, wait, so let's test. Let's live in an RV. That's how the RV thing happened. And we ended up selling the house, putting half our stuff in storage, selling the rest, and living in an RV for a year with the idea to go deeper into the empathy phase of what really truly blows my hair back. Um, and that is the story so in the book, I am taking you on the journey, all these different stops we made, showing you my own journey of transformation, using these 7 questions and walking you through the design thinking process. And that journey, really, I couldn't have thought in my mind if you said Google it, research it, make a list. I never would have imagined I would live in a ski mountain town in Colorado, with a tiny little business where I just work with clients in a very small group and one on one, having totally reinvented all of that.
Yeah.
Never would have thought it in a million years because it was in my unconscious. I had to excavate the dream.
Um, gosh, I everything you say really, really resonates. And I almost feel like turning this into my own personal coaching session because the things you're the things you're talking about are
You can
things that
call
are
me.
that, no, no, but the truth is what you're talking about, why I love this is that it is so very, very universal. You don't have to be a famous dating and relationship coach to have these questions about the choices you've made in your life, where they left you, how you spend most of your waking hours, how you spend your weekends. Right now, my weekends are driving kids to sports and stuff like that, and my nights are. My wife is exhausted from all the stay-at-home mom duties, so we kind of zone out watching, reruns of Friends. That's not my best life. It's just kind of what we're doing right now. And for me, like you, I love people. I love novel experiences. I love getting outside. And it's not built into our day to day, which is this foundation of stability. And I can't help but to wonder, is that just a function of like, hey, if you're going to be doing this for your kids, you don't want to have to move from city to city with the kids in the van, right? Is this just the price that one pays, or do you go really big? And again, I couldn't even imagine doing that, but I think it's exciting to think about.
And you can. So here's what's crazy is once we started doing all this prototyping, we like started really researching and we discovered the bucket list family who had these kids and they just decided to go around and have these bucket list experiences with their kids. There's people that are doing all sorts of things. I've had clients that have like decided to move abroad, retire early. I have a woman who's like a very high level C-suite corporate executive who her passion is to open a bar studio and have a community, right? And so she is like taking these small steps to do that. And so the thing is, and that's why I say question all assumptions and test, because um, you wouldn't just sell your house, pull your kids out of school, and go live on the road. You'd be like, hey guys, do you want to go take a trip in an RV for 1 week of spring break and see what that looks like? Right. And you might do that for 3 years, right? Like
Right.
figuring it out. And that's when life starts to become exciting again.
Hey, Marnie, and again, not part of our questions. Have you done, researched Modern Elder Academy at all?
Of course I have.
I was going to say because I did a class there by hosted by Ermenia Ibarra, whose book is I think Working Identity, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
about this stuff and what they call the messy middle and the process of reinventing and dabbling. The same thing you're talking about, just slightly different terminology of trying these different experiments, low stakes experiments, seeing what resonates, seeing what doesn't without blowing up your entire life. So for people who are now curious about what you're talking about, what we're talking about, can you share? Is it public knowledge what these Talmudic questions are? Is this something they have to buy the book to find, or is it something you can kind of like rattle off?
I can rattle and I can read as well. So here's what's great about the questions. So I changed the order and I modernized and universalized them. But the one that is, I think, and I talk about this at the beginning is, did you seek wisdom? I think what you and I have gone through in our lives and what our clients are doing when they're Googling, like, where do I meet great guys? They were seeking knowledge. We want to start asking better questions. I'm not going to elaborate on everyone because it would take forever. But so, did you seek wisdom? Were you authentically you? Um, were you radically honest with yourself? That's an important one for
No,
the
because
regret category.
most
Um,
people, most people, I want to touch on that because I think it's so important. It's astonishing to me how people's uh, desires and actions are so out of alignment. I remember hearing a definition of happiness once upon a time, and it's when your actions and your goals are aligned. So for every woman who says, I really want to find love, for example, narrow casting this thing, um, are all of your actions aligned with that? Usually not. We sort of just hope it happens. And so for most people, and myself included, that's why I'm sharing so much of myself on this thing. There's the life I want to lead, which is much more people based and far less computer based. And there's the one that I built for myself, which pays the bills, but keeps me away from people. And this is where all my time is spent trying to figure out how to do what Marnie's doing right now. So I
yeah.
share that
So
to my audience as a confession that, you know, I do have it all. And I'm an extrovert who leads a really introverted life, and that costs me in ways that I didn't calculate until now.
yeah, and so I think that radical self honesty is where you need accountability. It's good to have a coach for that because we can't, as they say, we can't read the label from inside the jar. So radical honesty is really huge. This one, did you busy yourself with creation? I think that this is a myth that creation is reserved for people who are young, creating families, creating careers, creating ideas, innovating, and that we think we get to a certain age and we just stop creating. We just do our thing. You can create new thoughts, you can create new friendships, you can create connections, you can create ideas, you can create so many things. So, did you live a life of creation? Um, did you make time for your spiritual life? This one is not meaning God or religion. It means, did you have a meeting with yourself more often than not to connect with your inner wisdom? And do you create stillness and moments of peace to reflect? Were you hopeful? So all the research shows that gratitude and appreciation change our energetic vibration. people want to date someone who's hopeful and positive and optimistic, not someone who says, where are all the good guys and dating sucks.
Yeah, it's hard.
And then finally, did you recognize the blessings? Um, and that is really about having a worldview of wonder. Um, we are often waiting for some large magical thing to happen to bring us joy, or to make us feel
Right.
whole or
It's
complete.
the winning the lottery. It's the meet cute guy in the grocery store and never have to wonder about going on a bad date again.
Counting the blessings is about savoring the fact that you're having this cup of coffee and those beans came from somewhere and how it tastes so amazing, and you're so grateful to be sitting in this moment, whether you're at your desk or whatever it is, and just being like, wow, this is a moment of being alive, and having the taking the time to not take it for granted. All the research shows we don't count our blessings until something is taken away from us. And that is not the way that we are going to find joy and happiness in our life. And by the way, when you live your life this way, your energetic vibration is going to go up, your joy is going to go up. You're just a being who is attractive and abundant and enlivened and feels younger and excited about life. Shit happens when you do that. And that can include meeting your person.
Yeah, I think there's so much going on. There's so much rapid change in the world, and there's never been more information about this kind of stuff. So all these things you're saying are little bits of wisdom that I've been kind of picking up ambiently from other sources, and you've compiled it into your radical living challenge. Um, and so the question I have, and it's not on the sheet, but it's the one that's popping up for me right now, is let's say we recognize that everything you're saying is true. I've got no arguments against everything. But the wave of society is almost going in the opposite direction. It's like we now have the knowledge to know that gratitude is important, hopefulness is important, community is important, meditation and nature, and it's in the zeitgeist, all of this. And yet the world itself is so phone based that it becomes harder and harder to tune out all the noise, like to unplug from all of it. So it seems like the thing that we want to do becomes increasingly hard, even though we know more people know the importance of it. It feels harder to do than ever. Does that make any sense?
It does. And the answer is so what? Right? That's why it's called a radical living challenge, because it's a rerouting and it's creating like a soul revolution for yourself. The truth is, like, to live an extraordinary life doesn't mean an easy life, right? And also there is no failure, right? So it's the act of engaging in the process of trying to be more grounded and anchored and self-care and get yourself outside and make bold choices and make sure your own words and actions match. It's the efforting that creates the self-trust and the joy. It is hard. And nobody does it
You said
perfect.
something really blithely that I want you to repeat. There is no failure. I agree with you. Explain that.
Um, so in this orientation where you become a creator in your life, there is no failure because everything is giving you feedback, and it's what you do with that feedback. I mean, I am a football fan and my team lost on the Super Bowl Sunday, and what I loved about that was the team being like, yeah, we sucked, so that just means like starting on Monday we are better, right? And that was an epic failure. um, right? And because that's the one choice that we get is how are we going to show up in the face of change, in the face of challenge? Somebody posted on Substack about this idea that like uncertainty is such a like inconvenient state. And I was like, uncertainty is like a daily state. It's like
Right.
we have to make friends with that because we're gonna fail. So most people who feel like they live meaningful lives failed a lot.
Right. I love, if I had to do another TED talk, I would love to talk about failure. And one of my favorite quotes is, "What would you do if you knew you could not fail?" Really, I have that hanging up in my backyard. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? And it goes to the same point that it's not failure. You are not a failure. This thing you did, this experiment you tried might not have worked. Thomas Edison quote, I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways that don't work. And
And I'm
so,
so good at that.
right. And that's the thing is, so when people have been kind of been beaten up, it's the ability to bounce back and maybe learn from your failure. It's not, right. I quote you, it's not dating the same guy in a different body.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, and that's, to me, that's a life well lived. Our challenges are here for us to grow into our next version of ourselves. And 90% of the time, our timing doesn't match up with the timing that the universe has for us. And it can be really freaking annoying. But what if you're like 3 feet from the finish line? You just can't see the finish line.
I
Why would you
love
stop?
I no, I love that. Like it's always very validating to talk to someone who you respect and reflects some of your thoughts back to you. Every time you were on a call right before you got here, I do those calls as well, and I do a post-it and I write down everything someone says, and I always point out that where you want to go, this life that you're living, your dream life with your guy, is not far away. You're like right over here. The problem is you're spinning around, driving around in circles, or you're with the wrong guy and you drove way, way, way off course, or you're just stuck in the driveway and you're not going anywhere. And the distance between you and your dream life, you could have it in a month. It's not that far away. And that's astonishing for most people who don't realize that they're spinning in circles or stuck in the driveway, if that makes any sense.
Well, I read this book. I'm still not done with it, but one of the things that it described it so great. It said, you have like this version of your life and this version of your life, but you are like at the crossroads in the middle. And what you've done is you've got a really nice lawn chair, maybe a little like table with a beer cozy, and you are so comfortable there that you don't even realize you're at a crossroads anymore. You just think this is what is. And so
Um,
it's like, get off the damn lawn chair, like take a step. But when you're like in the circles, you're like, this is the way it is. That's not true. It's the illusion, as they say.
right. Yeah. It's the way it is. Where there's life as it is, and then there's the choices that you make. And I think one of the things that I think are hard, and certainly I've struggled with, are when you don't know what to do, where you're paralyzed by indecision. There are so
Yep.
many paths, there are so many choices, and you feel like you're in the middle of a desert and you don't know which is the quickest way to your joy. How do people, when they're in emotional crisis, take a step in a direction when all of them seem viable and they don't trust their judgment?
I would say get this book and pick one question and do one thing, right? Like create something, ask a different question instead of why is this happening to me? Why is my boss such a jerk? Why do men suck? Why is online dating so bad? What's one act of gratitude that you can do, right? Try an experiment, try it for one day, prototype, right? Um, because your inaction is and I'll be really blunt because that's my secret sauce and my style is like, are you going to be more committed to your bullshit or are you going to be more committed to your vision? Because if you're going to argue for your limitations, I'll be like, you go.
Right.
Um, you get to be right. Right. So it's about moving off the lawn chair. Do one thing. Maybe you'll have
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. No, I get that. Um, Marnie, what's the next step that our listeners should take? There's your, I mean, we're trying to get this podcast out as quickly as possible. And I've got multiple websites and multiple channels for you. But if they only take one thing from listening to this without going into the show notes, what's the one thing they should do right now to start living their dream life and let go of the should life?
So Marni Battista is hard to spell, so I'm not going to give you that. I'm going to say decodeyourdestinyquiz.com.
Decode your destiny.
Decodeyourdestinyquiz.com. And in that, you're going to find out your archetype, which is like what your tendency is to either be creating your dream life or not, and very specific things that you can do to change it so that you can become a creator. And it will apply to all parts of your life. So decodeyourdestinyquiz.com.
Yeah, I'm on there right now taking a look at it. Yeah, if there's a 2-minute quiz that can point you in the right direction and send you closer step by step to the life that you want to be living, if you're not living that life right now, and most people are not, I very much believe in Marni and her wisdom and her methodology. You can find Marni very briefly on Facebook, Marni Battista or Dating with Dignity, Twitter, Marni Battista, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. She is everywhere. Just started the new Substack as well, which I have been reading, whether you know it or not. I've been reading, and I'm grateful to call you a friend and a mentor.
Oh, thank you, Evan. Look, here's the thing. You and I went on this path and we were like, okay, this is what we're going to do forever, which is so funny that no one told us like that may not be true. And so, wherever you are, however old you are listening to this, if you're older, if you're younger, just know that I'm giving you a big old, you had a yellow post-it note if you're listening to this. It's like a yellow permission slip. I give you permission to want more, even if your life is already great.
I love that. Thank you for being here, Marni. My
My
name is
pleasure.
Evan Mark Katz. This is the Love You podcast. If you are listening to this podcast right now, that means if you've gotten this far, it means you're my kind of person. And if you're my kind of person, you should be on my mailing list. Go to evanmarkkatz.com/quiz to discover if you're wasting too much time on the wrong men. My bet is the answer is yes. And if you want some love and attention and someone to hold your hand through this process, go to evanmarkkatz.com/now, book a time to talk with me, and we'll figure out how to get you the love that you deserve, where you feel safe, heard, and understood. Thank you for your time. I'll see you guys next week. Appreciate you. Bye bye.
Bye.